Well, we're still deep in the coronavirus pandemic situation, so all hardware shops are still closed in Cyprus. So just about to get hold of a couple of chickens, and I've therefore having to make feeders and waterers for them. So what I've done is I've bought a wash bowl, and this is the only container, way too expensive, but the only container I could find with a lid, this type of thing. So what I've done is used a knife to cut through. It's quite hard plastic. Cut through in each of the four sides enough. I think a big enough gap for the grain to get through. I'll need to check it once I've got the grain. And then that's going to sit inside the bowl. And once the grain will then come through the gaps. And the idea is the chickens will then eat the grain in the bowl itself, and it should be minimise the waste of grain on the ground. If the bowl turns out to be too high, I think it should be all right. But if it turns out to be too high, then I'll have to think of either a different bowl or bigger holes for the grain to come out to get the level of the grain higher. We'll see how it goes. But that's the feeder, and then the water I'm going to do a similar design where I'm going to use a bottle, and I'll show you that later. So as far as the water is concerned, all I'm going to do for this is I've got an old bowl that the dogs no longer wanted. They've chewed on the edges, but it's still a perfectly good bowl, and I've got an old washing up liquid container, very nice thick plastic that will sit in the bowl like this, and the idea is I'll drill some holes at the level that I want the water to not go above. Probably be, assuming I'm going to stick to using this bowl, because the bowl is a little bit high-sided, but if I think the birds can drink from there, then the holes need to be about halfway up the side of the bowl. So if the holes are somewhere like here, I'll need to check it in a second. If there's somewhere like here, 2 or 3, probably just 2 holes is enough, because you don't need water pouring out. You just need to have it as the level where the water will sit. And the idea is that that'll sit in there. You'll fill this up from here, and the water will then go out through the holes that I've drilled down below, up to that level. And as long as the top is on, the water will stop flowing once the vacuum forms inside the bottle. So that's the plan, and I'll show you the finished product shortly. So I've drilled only 2 holes to start with, and I can always drill more afterwards. That's the level that I want to try to start with. It'll enable me to go for a bowl with smaller sides if necessary. The reason I haven't done many holes is that it'd be easier to fill this up not sitting in the bowl. I'm going to fill it up sitting in the bowl now, but it'd be easier to fill it up not sitting in the bowl, and if the holes are too big, the water will just pour straight out, of course. So here's the plan, and now let's give it a go. So that's more or less full. I didn't quite fill it. Let's see what happens. That should now, yeah, so it's equalised now, vacuum formed in the bottle, so no more water is going to come out. So yeah, those 2 holes, perhaps even more, maybe 1 hole would have been enough, because the water was flowing out almost as quickly as I was putting it in towards the end there. Right, so tipped out the excess water. It's working. You can see that I didn't get to fill. Well, I'd filled up the bottle about 3/4, but by the time I got the lid on, another few inches had dropped back out again. So the secret is to fill it up as quickly as possible. Probably a wider necked bottle would be better, but this is the one I had, and I wanted this as quickly as possible. Beggars can't be choosers. So 1 hole would be enough. 2 holes means the water flows out very quickly as you're trying to fill it up, and the vacuum doesn't form, of course, until you get the lid on. So that's the lesson learned. Just 1 hole would be plenty. But I think this should work quite well. I hope it's not too high-sided, but I think it's going to be pretty good. So these are the finished products. Total build time was about 15 minutes. And since using them, I've discovered that for 4 birds, there's adequate for the feeder for about a week and for the water for about 3 days. And both of them, due to the high lips on the side, which are fully accessible by the birds, but it does mean that very little dirt gets in and very little food gets pushed out in the feeder.